Hello, this is Black Libertarian. I am black, and I am a libertarian. In today's video, we're going to talk about the third of those three libertarian principles that I keep talking about. They are, in order, the non-aggression principle, the right to self-ownership and property rights, and the third one is the freedom of association. Those are the three main principles. I talked about them in my previous video before, and today is the third video in that series, the philosophy of free association. Let's get started. So as I mentioned before, libertarianism is based on the underlying principle of universal morality, which is that every person in the world, everywhere, should be subject to the same moral principles, that morality should apply equally to everyone simultaneously with no exceptions. Nobody's going to be an exception just because they're rich, or just because they're poor, or just because they're white, or just because they're black, or just because they're a man, or just because they're a woman, or just because anything else that you can think of. The moral principles will apply to every person equally without exception. The non-aggression principle. It is immoral to initiate force against any other person. The only type of legitimate use of force is retaliatory force, when somebody else initiates force. But no person has the moral right to initiate force against any other person. So we talked about that. We also talked about the fact that you own yourself and you own the effects of your actions. Everyone has the right to own property. When we say ownership, you can think of ownership as the exclusive decision-making rights regarding something. And so, we talked about how we come to own our bodies, and the process of how we own our bodies is the same process of how we can own anything else. Anything that's made of molecules and atoms, any physical object, they all share the same set of steps on how that thing comes to be owned. And it doesn't matter whether it's my hand, or whether it's a chair, or whether it's a television, or anything else. Anything can be owned, and ownership is always created in the exact same way. And we talked about that in my previous video about property rights. And so if you take those two concepts, the non-initiation of force on one hand, and property rights and self-ownership on the other, then the only logical conclusion that you can make from that is that people, adults, consenting adults, should be allowed to interact with other consenting adults in any way that they choose. And this is what we call free association. A free interaction is any interaction that doesn't involve the initiation of force and also doesn't involve violation of property rights. That is a free interaction. You can also call it a voluntary interaction. Any interaction that doesn't involve the initiation of force and also doesn't involve violation of property rights. Any interaction that doesn't involve those things is called a voluntary interaction. So any interaction that doesn't involve those things is called a voluntary interaction. So this is where we come to the word voluntary and the word freedom. And so, as a result, you can see that what's happening here is that the right of free association is a conclusion. It's the type of thing that would be logically concluded from those premises. if you believe that no one has the right to initiate force against any other person, and if you believe that nobody has the right to violate anyone else's property rights, then you must, in conclusion, also believe that when people interact with each other, they have the right to interact as long as they don't violate those other two principles. And so people have the right to interact with each other on a voluntary basis. And so if you have a situation in which all of the people involved respect those two principles, NAP and property rights, then that situation could be called a free market. That's what a free market is. A free market is any situation in which two or more people interact with each other on a voluntary basis. And what do I mean by voluntary? I mean interaction that doesn't involve violations of the NAP or violations of anyone's property rights. That situation is a free market situation. So if you want to look at an example of a free market situation, you can look at the example of this video. This YouTube video right here that you are watching. This is a free market because you and I are interacting with each other. Now, we're not interacting in person. We're interacting over the media of over the internet. But I made this video, and then you went on the video and watched it. And so this is a form of interaction. But the interaction doesn't involve initiating force. I'm not forcing you to watch this video. I didn't force you to click on this video. I didn't threaten you with violence. I didn't initiate any physical force on you to make you click the video or to make you watch it or make you leave a comment or to click the subscribe button or to click the like button or any of those things. I didn't initiate any force against you in order to do that. You didn't initiate any force against me in order for me to make this video and upload it onto YouTube. And so when we have this interaction with each other, when you and I have we're having an interaction right now, and it is completely voluntary, which means this is a free market interaction right here. If you have a conversation with somebody, and you walk up to them and say, "Hi, how's it going?" and they say, "Hey," that's a free market interaction. That's a free market right there because nobody's initiating force against anybody and nobody is violating anyone's property rights. All right? When you voluntarily enter a romantic relationship with somebody, all right, that is a free market interaction. All right? Because if I kidnap a woman off the street and lock her in my basement and say, "Hey, this is my girlfriend now," right? That would not be legitimate. She's not really my girlfriend. It's just someone that I kidnapped and locked in my basement, right? Because it involves the initiation of force. It involves violation of property rights. So that's not a free market interaction. But if we voluntarily decide to interact and we get into a romantic relationship, right, and then we live together, that would be a free market interaction because it doesn't involve the initiation of force and it doesn't involve violations of property rights. It's free association. And so each of those are little micro examples of free markets in work, at work. All of those are free associative interactions. You can call it a free market. You can call it free association. You can call it voluntary interaction. All of those words are just basically different ways of describing the same thing. A free associative interaction, is the result of what happens when when people respect the NAP and when people respect property rights. That is the natural result of what ends up happening. You end up with a free market. That's exactly what that is. And they can also refuse to associate themselves or refuse to associate themselves or to interact with anyone they want. If I don't want to marry somebody, then I have the right to say no. If I don't want to accept a job that an employer offers, I have the right to say no. I have the right to say no. I have the right to refuse to interact with anyone. If I just want to be a hermit, live out in the wilderness and just not interact with any other person at all, I have the right to do that. I have the right to interact with or not interact with any other consenting individual that I want. And so if I want to try to interact with everybody, or if I want to try to interact with nobody and just be by myself, all of those are valid options. All of those are because in all of those situations, nobody's initiating force against anybody and nobody's violating anybody's property rights. And if you have a whole society that is based on those principles, the non-aggression principle and the self-ownership and property rights, if you have a whole society that's based on the value of those principles, then that society is a free market society or a voluntarist society, or you could call it a libertarian society. A society that's based on those principles, by definition, must be one in which people have the right to freely associate with each other. So that's one of the reasons why I have this YouTube channel. I have it because I am advocating for a completely libertarian society, a voluntarist free market society that is based on the non-aggression principle and property rights, where everyone has the right to freely associate with any consenting individual that they want. And I believe that that's the only moral way to do it. It would be immoral to have a society where some people have the legal right to initiate force against other people. The only force that's legitimate is retaliatory force. When somebody else initiates force against you, when you retaliate with force against them, that would be the only legitimate use of force, retaliatory. So nobody should have the right to use initiatory force. Initiatory force would not be considered a legitimate use of force in a free society. So there's a question that often comes up with when I talk about the having a free society, voluntarist society, libertarian society, a free market society, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same. One of the questions that comes up is, hey, wait a minute. If I can't force anybody to give me anything, like, for example, I can't force anybody to give me food. I can't force anybody to give me shelter or clothing. I can't force anybody to even pay attention to me. Like, if everyone is just allowed to just ignore me and pretend like I don't exist, why would anyone do so? Why would anyone want to give me any goods or services if I don't have the ability to force them to give it to me? Isn't it true that I have to force people to give me things in order for them to give it? Otherwise, why would they do such a thing? So that's a legitimate question. And this is the part where we have to talk about human nature. Because it's often misunderstood people who are not libertarians often misunderstand the libertarian position on human nature. What is the nature of humanity? Because there are some people out there who believe that it is human nature to be evil, that humans are born with some sort of original sin that causes them to desire evil. So as soon as a baby is born, right out the womb, that baby automatically has a predisposition to do bad things. And that's one view. The view that human nature is inherently morally evil or morally bad. And then there's another view that says that human nature is inherently morally good. That when babies are born out the womb, they just instinctively have this predisposition to always do good and to make other people happy and to never do anything bad to anybody. And so those people believe that is what human nature is. That the human nature is fundamentally morally good. And, the only reason why people would do something evil is because they're corrupted by society or something like that. Libertarians actually believe that both of those views are wrong. Coming to be a running gag on this channel. Both of these are wrong. Both of these views are wrong. And so what libertarians don't believe that humans are inherently evil or inherently good. All right? What we believe is that the true nature of humans, in fact, not just humans, but like the nature of like any organism, is to seek benefits. We believe that human beings are motivated by incentives. In other words, we have a tendency to seek actions that bring benefit to ourselves and to avoid actions that bring detriment to ourselves. And by the way, that's not just humans. That's just like any organism, like other animals will do this, and bacteria will do this, and plants. Like every organism in some way, shape, form, or fashion will exhibit this behavior to try to seek benefits or do things or at least attempt to do things that bring benefits, and to avoid detriments or to avoid things that bring harm to oneself. And that's what we believe that humans do. Because when you look at babies, all right, newborn babies, they don't really seem to care a whole lot about doing bad things to other people or even doing good things to other people for that matter. What they do seem to care about is what they want. They do a whole lot of thinking about what they want, what they like, what they don't like, whether or not they feel hungry or whether or not they feel tired or whether or not they feel bored and they want somebody to play with them, right? That's what they think about. That's what babies think about. They think about what they want. That's what they're born with. They are born with the ability to think about what they want and how they feel and whether or not they feel hungry or tired or lonely or bored or whatever it is. All right? And they don't seem to care a whole lot about whether or not other people feel bored or hungry or any of that, right? They don't really seem to care a whole lot about whether other people are feeling that way. All they know is what they want. And they will always try to seek out what they want. Now, remember, I'm not saying that this behavior is inherently good or inherently bad. I'm not saying it's good to do that. I'm not saying it's bad to do that. I'm just saying that's what fundamental human nature is. To try to do things that benefit oneself and try to avoid things that bring detriment. Another way you could say that is to try to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. That's another way of saying it. To seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's basically what human nature is. with a little disclaimer here, I've used the word self a lot so far. When I say self, when I say people try to benefit oneself, or they try to avoid detriment to oneself, when I say self here, self is it's a very complicated thing, okay? Basically what self is, self can refer to one's person, or one's property, or one's family, or one's group, or one's tribe, or whatever it is that a person includes in the circle of the self. You could say that self is kind of like a circle, and anything inside of that circle I consider to be myself. So when I say self, I'm not just talking about my physical body, my arms and legs, and that's it, and there's nothing else. No, when I say I want to bring benefit to myself, that can include things like people like my babies, right? So if I take care of my babies and I protect my babies, I am benefiting myself. If something bad happens to one of my babies, I consider that to be the same thing as something bad happening to me. I go to my friends. I say, something bad happened. I had this bad experience. They say, what happened? Well, one of my babies got sick. Right. And I treat it the same as it happening to me, because I include them in the circle of myself. So when I say self here, I'm talking about a lot of various things that can factor into it. And of course, what is included in self, that changes from person to person, because every person is different. Every person has different priorities. And so when I say people want to benefit themselves, I'm not saying that people are not trying to benefit other people. Because other people, like their families and their children and stuff, can be included in all of that, and it would still count as self. All right. So I want to make that very, very clear. When I say that human nature is to benefit oneself, all right, I'm not saying to the exclusion of anybody, to the exclusion of any other person. All right, because one's person is just one of the aspects of the self. It gets to be a very philosophical topic, and that's not really the topic of this video. So the only thing I wanted to say about that subject right now is that I don't want you to be scared hearing me say self and thinking that what I mean is just my body and that's it. Nothing outside of my body is myself, and that's not true. But so yes, it is human nature to try to seek benefits for oneself. So we have that question. In a society in which nobody is forced to give me, I don't have, or at least I don't have the right to force anybody to give me goods and services. Why would they give them to me? Well, one of the reasons why they might do it is because they stand to gain some sort of benefit from doing that. To gain some sort of benefit by giving me the goods and services. So if I can figure out a way, in a free society, if I can figure out a way to benefit someone else, then that person will give me goods and services. Why? Because they can benefit from giving me those goods and services. And if I can convince two people, if I can figure out a way to benefit two people, if they give me goods and services, then those two people will give me goods and services. If I can figure out a way to do that with 10 people, if I can benefit 10 different people, then those 10 different people can give me goods and services. If I can figure out a way to benefit 100 people, if I can benefit 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, 1,000,000,000 people, then 1,000,000,000 people will give me goods and services. Because all 1,000,000,000 of those people stand to benefit by doing so. They will benefit by giving me goods and services. Now, of course, those goods and services can come in the form of goods and services, but they can also come in the form of basically money, which is a promise of goods and services in the future. That's basically what money is. It's a promise of goods and services in the future. And so if I can figure out a way to benefit 1 billion people, those 1 billion people will give me value, and then I will get rich as a result. And that's how people get rich if they're in a society where nobody has the right to initiate force, and nobody has the right to violate people's property, and people are freely associating in a voluntary manner. The only way that somebody can actually get rich is if they can figure out a way to benefit everyone else. In other words, in a free society, you get rich by enriching the people around you. And so what I would have to do in that sense is I would have to behave in a manner that would encourage other people to give me value. And that's part of the reason why I believe that a free society is more moral than a society that is not free, a society that is not based on non-aggression and property rights. And this is what makes libertarianism different from things like socialism and communism, because they will answer the question of, well, how will I supposed to get those things if I can't force them to give it to me? And they will answer that question by saying, well, people will just give them to you just out of the goodness of their heart, because people are just naturally inclined to do stuff like that. If the society is based on non-aggression and property rights, then I actually have a very good reason to not act like an abusive tyrant. So, as an example, if I want something from somebody, I have to treat that person nicely, and I have to give that person value, and I have to give that person benefit, so that in such a way that they will give me what I want. So, for example, if I'm married, and if one of the things I want is for my wife to not leave me, then, well, what types of things would I have to do? I would have to give value to her. I would have to treat her nicely, and I would have to, give her compassion and love and attention, and I would have to invest time into the relationship and, say, lovely things to her, and I would also have to avoid doing things like beating her and calling her names, and I would have to avoid acting like an abusive tyrant, right? If I start acting in that way, she's going to leave me, right? Because she doesn't have to stay with me, and she should leave me, all right? If I start treating my wife in that manner, she should leave me. There's no reason why she should stay with me if I am treating her in that type of abusive way. So if one of the things that I want is for her to stay with me and not leave, then I have to treat her nicely. And so she's going to benefit. She's benefited because she's being treated nicely, because she's being loved, because she's being treated with respect and dignity and all those types of things, etc., etc. And the same thing is true if I'm a business person. If I'm a business person, and if one of the things I want is for my customers to not leave me, and I want them to come back a second time, third time, I want repeat customers, well, what types of things would I have to do? Would I be able to just treat my customers unfairly and rip them off and steal money from them and break my promises and say, here, I'll give you this iPad for $500, and then they give me the $500, and then I just don't give them the iPad? Is that how I win repeat customers? Of course not. I'm not going to get what I want if I treat them like that. The only way for me to get what I want is to treat them nicely and keep my promises and don't rip them off and don't steal their money behave in a professional manner. And if I do those things, that is the type of behavior that will encourage repeat customers, because the customers don't have to give me their business. Nobody is forced to interact with me. In a free society, you can't force other people to respect you. You have to be respectable. And so that's why I believe that a free society, one that's based on libertarian principles, on voluntarism, is the only type of society that truly is moral. Because it's not moral for me to initiate force against people to force them to do what I want. To initiate force against a woman to force her to stay with me. Chain her up and lock her in my basement and say, this is my wife now. Right? That would not be moral. To force a person to buy stuff from my business. Force them to be my customer. Right? And threaten them with violence if they don't buy my products. Right? That would not be healthy. And besides, if I did those things, if it were perfectly legitimate for me to initiate force against people, to force them to do what I want, then I have absolutely no reason to be nice. I have absolutely no reason to act in an ethical manner. I have absolutely no reason to treat anyone nicely or to keep any of my promises. I have absolutely no reason to do anything to bring benefit to anyone else. All I have to think about is my own benefit, because those people don't have a choice of whether or not they want to support me. They don't have a choice. I'm forcing them to do it. And so this is why libertarians believe that using the coercive power of the state in order to force other people to make them do what you want is not, it's not just immoral, but it's also inefficient. And by efficiency, I mean good at meeting people's desires or preferences. Because if a politician somewhere can simply force everyone to do what he wants, he doesn't have to worry about keeping any of his promises. He doesn't have to worry about making sure that everyone is happy, or that making sure that to try to bring benefit or value to anybody else. The only thing he really has to think about is how to get reelected. If it's a government that allows elections. That's the only thing the politician needs to think about. He doesn't need to think about actually bringing value to anybody, because the citizens have no choice but to do what he wants. So he doesn't have to be respectable. He can just force everyone to respect him. And so that is the basis for the freedom of association, for a voluntary free market system. It's based on human nature. It's human nature to try to get benefits. And the best way to get value and benefits from other people is to provide value and benefits yourself. Because that's human nature. If someone else can benefit from giving me something, then they'll give it to me so that they can get the benefit. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy the video, or even if you didn't enjoy the video, or if you agree or disagree with anything I'm saying, please leave a comment. Leave a comment and I will reply. I reply to every comment. So please leave a comment on here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.